Daniel was exiled from his society, allegedly castrated, and had to live in a paganistic society. But even after the lines that how from that place you stay grounded in the Lord. Why Daniel? You know, if you're a man of national security, why didn't you more so focus on like King Solomon or David?
How do I navigate politics and academics, which is very secular, hostile to the faith, and Daniel became that model for me.
What does the average reader miss?
There's angelic beings who control territory, who want power, who fighting one another. There's a lot more going on, and it really is above our pay grade.
How do you stay faithful in a society that does not honor God?
We have a kingdom of God to serve first. If he's going to deliver us, he's going to deliver us. If he's going to allow them to kill us, so be it. This is my God. I serve my God regardless of what you say.
Hello, hello. My name is Cassian Bellino, and this is Biblically Speaking. Today, I am so excited to chat about a topic that maybe your pastor skipped over, maybe it's something you haven't even thought about, but how do you stay faithful in a society that does not honor God? You know, how do you stay faithful to God in maybe a workplace that is quite agnostic? How do you stay faithful when you're around friends that you just met, that you're trying to relate to, you're trying to honor and not disrespect, but while remaining faithful to your God? Today we're going to talk about all that and how Daniel is a perfect example of that. But before you stop listening, because maybe you don't like the book of Daniel or you just don't know it, it's not one of your familiar books, I can't emphasize enough how what we're going to discuss today is more relevant than most stories we talk about, simply because we are Daniel. Daniel was exiled from his society, exiled from his family. He was allegedly castrated and had to live, work, and thrive in a paganistic society that was not his own culture. How many of us have to do that on a day-to-day basis, whether it's professionally, with a family member, with friends, within a new state? So I think I could speak for all of us that we all encounter things of unfamiliarity and yet still do not know how to navigate with respect, with success, and while still honoring our Lord and Savior. So to navigate this very tricky topic, I have an expert, a resident expert, to discuss his new book, Daniel in Babylon. If you're on YouTube, you can see the cover. We will be referencing this book throughout this conversation. Dr. Mark Clark has been on Biblically Speaking many times. I mean, you were on to discuss aliens. That was an amazing episode. Mm-hmm. You were on to discuss Daniel. You know, that was kind of like my intro into this topic. But now you're back to discuss your commentary that, like you said just before we got started, you've been thinking about this, working on this. It's been on your heart for 30 plus years. So today we're going to discuss many things as far as the applications, the appeals, just Daniel as a whole. But you will exit this episode being able to reference this book in the Bible and this book by Dr. Clark as a manual on how to remain faithful amidst a paganistic, unfaithful, agnostic society, situation, place, wherever you are. And to ensure, you know, that this is trustworthy and that you can trust the credentials of this commentary, let's just go over your resume. You're Emeritus Professor of Political Science and National Security Studies, so you can talk about governments, you can talk about national security. You're a former U.S. Marine, thank you for your service. You're the TBN co-host of Reasons to Believe. Shout out to Reasons to Believe. I love Reasons to Believe. You're the co-author of Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men. You're a member of the scholar community at Reasons to Believe. And most importantly today, you are the author of Daniel in Babylon. Thank you so much for coming back on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to talk about this book.
It truly is. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. So today, I'm just like, what are the things? I have this question that I want to ask you, and I'm like, are we teeing it up correctly?
Tee it up.
We're going to go over a lot today, but most importantly, what is the image on the front of this book? Because I want to guess it's the scene that's the writing on the wall up here. It looks like there's like a Grim Reaper in the middle. It looks like a ballroom with a feast going on. What is this?
That's a very good question. I asked the Whippenstock, the publishers, where did they get this? Because it's gorgeous. It's a painting from 1821 by John Martin, and it's recorded in the Yale History Museum of British history. So it's and it's Wikipedia open, so it's one of those open stocks. It's Belshazzar's Last Feast. So it is the handwriting on the wall, just as it's coming to an end. Good guess. Very good.
Yeah, it looks chaotic. It looks like there's a Grim Reaper in the middle. Everyone's freaking out. I mean, that whole scene. I mean, just Daniel in itself. It's so cinematic. Like, I wish that Hollywood would just look at the book of Daniel and make like a whole series on it, because of the things that happen are so insane.
Hmm. Insane, but there is a new series out. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's The House of David, and it's really good. And my Jewish friends and Jewish historians I know even really like it, even though it's produced by Christians. So, and of course, some Christians don't like it because they say, oh, it's not exactly biblically accurate. They give a disclaimer: hey, some things are changed slightly to for narrative, showing and for visual appeal. But it's a
Yeah.
great book. But yeah, my hope is too the Book of Daniel gets that same kind of traction.
Just so many things. I mean, can you imagine being at a feast at a king's table and just, I mean, how do you imagine? I imagine just like the writing appears on the wall. You don't see a hand, you don't see a pen, it just appears.
I think a finger appears actually. And it's like a finger, a divine finger or something, an angelic presence appears, and then words are etched out in the air. So like a hologram.
Could you imagine?
Well, remember Daniel wasn't there. They had to find him to go, because they either forgot about him or whatever and said, no one could deal with this. Let's go get Daniel. Well, there was a guy in your kingdom who could solve mysteries. It's that guy, Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the end
Well,
of Belshazzar's reign too. That was the Mene Mene Tekel Esfardan, which means it's a combination of Aramaic and Persian, which means you've been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Your kingdom will be divided with the Medes and the Persians, and that was the end of his reign. Boom,
yeah,
that night.
not kind of a party killer.
Definitely a buzzkill.
The vibe was ruined after that.
I think so. I think so. Yep.
Wow. Okay, so first off, just backing up, why Daniel? You know, if you're a man of national security, why didn't you more so focus on like King Solomon or David?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking. So early in my career, I was an untenured professor heading a graduate program of national security studies. The person that should have taken over the program when I got hired as an untenured assistant professor didn't get tenure, so he quit. And then I was ahead of this, but I was also, co-hosting Hugh's show on TBN, Reasons to Believe. And I got called in one day by two deans who really were upset with me. What are you doing representing the university and your faith? You can't mix these two. And I remember in the middle of that conversation feeling kind of angry until I recalled the words of Jesus, blessed are you when you're persecuted for my name's sake. Now, honestly, it wasn't persecution the same way many Christians throughout history have been persecuted, but it was enough that it sort of produced a trauma in me. One reason why I address trauma in the Bible is because it really bothered me. But I was very fortunate, very blessed to start a 6-week study at this time on the book of Daniel, how he navigated politics. And it
And that
became
was just like a personal decision to study that?
no, actually, Hugh Ross, his class Paradoxes, asked me to do a 6-week study one summer
Got
when
it.
he was going to be gone. But it was perfect. It's one of those, not, I wouldn't say supernatural, but hypernatural, one of those providential things that God does. And he gave me that. And for me, Daniel was that model to follow because although I knew the words of Jesus and I knew the Bible, what I didn't know is how do I navigate politics and academics, which is very secular, hostile to the faith. And Daniel became that model for me. And probably the most standout thing I saw from the book of Daniel that really affected me was he was always obedient to authority. He always honored the intention of those in authority, even though he resisted being taken into the mainstream of that culture. And the other thing was, and this is where it really became cool to me, was his work ethic was outstanding, and so Daniel's was. So I had to work harder than anyone else so that if people attacked me, it would be for my faith, not for my work ethic. And that's where, to me, Daniel excelled, because that's exactly what happens in the middle of the book. Daniel chapter 6, they found no grounds of accusation or corruption against him, so they had to go after his faith.
Yes, you so beautifully articulate that in the book where it's one of those like, as long as you are honoring God, you're not doing anything wrong. So while he did receive his punishments justly because he was not honoring the laws of his ruler, he did so to honor God and then accepted those punishments fairly. He couldn't get mad and say, "Well, I was honoring my God, so you know, cut me some slack here."
Or give me my rights, right? The modern approach is I stand on my rights. Wait a minute, we have a kingdom of God to serve first. And he is the all-powerful one. If he's going to deliver us, he's going to deliver us. If he's going to allow them to kill us, like we saw with his three friends in the burning fiery furnace in chapter 3, so be it. This is my God. I serve my God regardless of what you say.
And I think that's honestly terrifying. I mean, it's really hard to honor God, knowing that it's breaking the laws. But I mean, this is such a beautiful dance because he also did honor the local laws and cultures
He did.
because, like, out of respect. So he danced this beautiful dance of accepting a paganistic name. And, to me, I'd be like, whoa, 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 sorry, that's my hard line, not going to take a pagan name. But he did so while still honoring God. So it's just this beautiful reflection of what, he didn't take it too far in any way. And he still honored God. So again, like this element, like for me, it gets very personal because I lived in Thailand, which is very Buddhist, and
Hmm.
so you want to honor, like they have all these Buddhist holidays, they have the king, and you go to all these temples, like you want to interact with the culture, and so here you are as a Christian going to these temples, and you're like, wait, should I light incense? Like, should I even walk into this temple? But I don't want to disrespect this beautiful country that's hosting me,
Hmm.
but also I don't want, like where's the line? So I think this book does such a good job of showing his infallibility almost of honoring God without disrespecting even like all the guards with his appeals. I mean, so before we get into the appeals and any of that, I think one of the key things that you do within this book is also just prove the reliability of what we're reading. Because I think as Christians, I think you do a great job of like testing what we're asking. You do a really great job of like, yeah, yeah, this is great. Love the story. Love the God. But can we still believe it? Is there still reliability? So you take a lot of effort to address what the critics say. But just to kind of outline it, what are some of the key critiques, gaps that people like to attack when it comes to the authorship of Daniel?
That's a really good question. So I trusted it personally when I believed it when I did the original study, long before I attempted to disprove the counter thesis, and I'll explain what that is here in a second. So for me, I trusted it personally, and it had great effect. What I will say is, from the time when I was first harassed for having faith to studying Daniel to my retirement party, they put me in the College Hall of Fame. And so I think it was the way in which God honored me through the college, the kingdom of man, by being faithful to God and the authorities there.
Yeah.
Um, but what I found was, as I began to do a deep dive on it, I read, you read a lot of history about the time, and so you have to read about Babylon, about Persia, about the Assyrians, about Judah, and I would say 90+% of the scholars that are out there are very skeptical of the book of Daniel. And the first thing they say is, well, if they actually make an argument, most of the time they don't. Most of the time they just assume it's inaccurate, it's ahistorical. And the reason they do that is this: because it's very accurate up until the 2nd century BC, time of Antiochus Epiphanes, they say it's what they call vaticinium ex eventu. It's prophecy after the fact. It's, in other words, it wasn't written as prophecy before, it was written as history after. That doesn't solve all the problems. In fact, it creates other problems that a lot of scholars have to deal with. So what most of them do is they take their cue from a 3rd century Neoplatonist anti-Christian by the name of Porphyry. And Porphyry, probably, if you look at the Wikipedia page and any background on Porphyry, the only thing we know about him is from Christians who wrote against his arguments. And Porphyry was this guy who might have been a Christian in his youth and became a very strong anti-Christian as he got older. In fact, he went so far as to say if Christians don't recant their belief, they should be tried and executed. And there was this big push. Remember, a lot of early church people were literally persecuted by being put in not lion's den, but in the Colosseum, having set on fire, you name it, all kinds of things. So this is a pattern that you see early Rome after the church really gets established before it converts to Christianity, as it were. Porphyry is one of the ones. So most of the scholars would say following Porphyry, and then they move forward, meaning it's all vaticinium ex eventu. In other words, his stuff was written in the 2nd century. So all of them, the vast majority of them, assume it's either a work of historical fiction or it's a work of historical fiction because it was written by an anonymous Jew during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. And that's about the middle of the 2nd century BC. Now, just so that the listener has a context, Antiochus Epiphanes was probably the worst king that the Seleucid Empire, one of the 4 empires that came from Alexander the Great's conquest, which is depicted and prophesied in Daniel, um, This one is the only one. He is the one said many religious scholars believe he is the first to start religious persecution. He really went after the Jewish faith, tried to kill them, tried to force them to not read the Torah, to change their sacrifices, to sacrifice pigs in the temple. There was a lot of things he did, or they did. So definitely there was this, that's probably the two biggest things. They say it's a second century author, or they just completely assume it is and ignore it, and they have to go on to other things.
But one of the things that really stood out to me was that on page 128 it says every part of Daniel's book was preserved in the Dead Sea Scrolls of Qumran.
Uh-huh.
That's insane.
It's really interesting. The Qumran scrolls, Dead Sea Scrolls, were around this, the community of Qumran was living about 150, right in the middle of the second century. It wouldn't make sense for Jews and those who were part of this community to accept the authority, the canonization of the book of Daniel, if they believed him to have been written, within a decade, meaning it was just a recent addition. That's why that argument doesn't hold water. But there's multiple reasons why it doesn't hold water. But that's the key reason. And the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, started in the 3rd century and was completed in the 2nd century. And we have a lot of proof that they included the whole book of Daniel. So it's like, you really have to come up with a better argument. They do. They try a bunch of different things, but those are the main arguments. A lot of Christians are surprised by this. They didn't know there was an alternative explanation. Where I see it the most is in liberal Christianity, or in progressive, not Christianity, but progressive modern kind of scholarship, or modern progressive scholarship. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but they basically sort of ignore it and then either treat it as a story, a fanciful story, or ignore it for what it's worth. Here's another good reason what's wrong with that. They claim in the past, they've always claimed Daniel was wrong historically. So, for example, when Daniel says later that Belshazzar promises at that final feast, I promise you the 3rd position in the kingdom, he denies it. He declines it, I should say. What critics say, well, look, there's no Belshazzar in history. Why would he be 3rd? Why wouldn't he be 2nd? Well, it turned out we knew historically there was a fellow by the name of Nabonidus who was the king at that time. What we didn't know until those chronicles were found in the 19th century, that Belshazzar was the crown prince, that he was 2nd in command, and that he could only offer Daniel the 3rd position. He couldn't offer him the 2nd. So, I mean, there's good historical counter arguments for everything that the critics bring up.
Yeah, yeah. So what are some of the context clues for reliability that we
Well,
can look towards?
sure, I think there's a number. I mean, one of the things you look at in evidence for a work is I look for, is there any record of a person named Belteshazzar? There isn't, and that's partly because a lot of the research stopped in the 1980s with the Iran-Iraq War, then the 2 Gulf Wars, and the ongoing conflict. So we don't have all the evidence from Babylon itself. That's for sure, and we probably never will get it for a variety of reasons. The other thing is, when you look at particularly historical evidence, you look at eyewitness testimony. And the book of Ezekiel is very comparable. Ezekiel was taken not in 605 like Daniel, but in probably 586, the second big deportation, the one that was destructive of the temple and all that. Ezekiel comments on Daniel, and he says he's the man, he's well known for wisdom and for solving great mysteries. And that's the two things Daniel is known for. So you have sort of a contemporary eyewitness to Daniel's prominence. And Daniel would have been alive long enough and prominent in the Babylonian administration for Ezekiel to become completely aware of his reputation. Now,
Because Ezekiel was after Daniel.
and he was taken to Babylon like Daniel was, but he wasn't put in administration. He was probably put just in community service of some kind.
Got it. Got it. So Ezekiel was out here referencing Daniel already,
Yeah.
known for his. So it wouldn't have been long enough for it to just become lore.
Right. And so some critics, only one that I'm aware of, will say, well, look, that's really referring to a Daniel of Ugaritic myth in the northern Syria area of a 13th century myth. The problem is this Daniel, this so-called Daniel, is not known for wisdom or for solving mysteries. So it's a real stretch, meaning sometimes you watch them make their case and they really have to stretch to make it work. But anyway, so that's one, but there's several others. I mean, they when we look at the canonization process in the Jewish law, they all regarded it as canonical. And by canonical, the Jews meant both inspired by God and a set for a rule of how we are to live in a community. So as early as the Daniel times, it was already regarded as, and that would have been 538, 537 BC. So several hundred years before the second century. But you also have during the early, Qumran scrolls, and then soon after that, you have Christians. Jesus himself refers to Daniel as the prophet and talks about some of his prophecies yet future. So you have a consistent tradition of people, contemporaries and near contemporaries, and ongoing tradition of people believing that Daniel is written. Josephus in the first century, an unfaithful Jew, but a Roman Jew who had sort of not a practicing Jew, wrote a history about it. And he claimed in his history that when there's a particular high priest called Jaddua, when Alexander came to Jerusalem, he presented him the book of Daniel, saying, look, you prophesied you're going to win. You were going to beat all these empires. So there's a lot of, not just Christian and not just Hebrew, but even non or secular people accepting the reliability of this book. But main thing is myself, Jesus our Lord accepted it.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't need to overcomplicate it.
Right. But people do.
Yeah. Running my own podcast, I'm always moving too fast. I'm finding guests, I'm editing episodes, I'm creating reels, or guesting on other shows. Not to mention, I just live in a world that moves fast. Notifications, trends, endless to-do lists. You know what feels like a blessing in all that? Slowing down. I'd love nothing more than a moment to pause, be present, and choose something timeless. That's exactly what Dwell Label is all about. When I first discovered Dwell Label, it wasn't just about the clothes, it was about a mindset. Thoughtful, intentional fashion that doesn't scream for attention, but instead invites you to slow down. Their pieces are modern takes on classic styles, made to last, not just for the season, but for years. I love that I can throw on a Dwell Label outfit for editing in a coffee shop, Bible studies, or looking professional in an interview. It always feels right. Comfortable, effortless, elevated. And here's the best part. Dwell Label does not just talk about rest. They live it. Their website literally doesn't work on Sundays because they believe in pausing and dwelling on what matters most. So if you're looking for high quality, timeless fashion that aligns with a lifestyle of intention and presence, I can't recommend Dwell Label enough. Shop Dwell Label with the link in the show notes and use my code BIBSPEAK15, BIBSPEAK15 for an exclusive discount at checkout. Take a breath, slow down, and dwell in the good things. Now, back to the show.
There's reasons for that. I mean, this is where they have a hard time with apocalyptic literature. One, they say it doesn't happen. So what assumption feeds that? I mean, let's be honest. If you accept that there's a God who created space, time, and the whole universe, then the idea of prophecy is not only not impossible, it's highly likely that it will occur. Mm-hmm. But if you don't accept that, then you have to work against that. You have to push back against that, because that means there's something supernatural out there and it can tell us the future. And the future's not bright for some people.
Wait, so you're saying that people are struggling, like essentially if there is a God, it would make sense that there would be prophecy. Mm-hmm. But if there is not a God, then prophecy can't take place? Or am I missing that?
Yeah, no, exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we really overcomplicate it. And I think I was talking to a scholar recently and they were like, you just have, like, if you're going to accept that Jesus died and rose 3 days later, you can accept everything else. Like, you can't pinpoint that, Daniel, but like the resurrection, for sure. Like you have to take all of it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You do. You do. It's a unified whole because of the way God intended all the writers to. Right. It doesn't contradict each other itself. It's complementary.
Which is why conversations like this are so helpful, because that systematic. I just learned systematic theology, where you can't just take in this one book of Daniel. You see how Daniel fits into all the other books.
Yes, exactly. In fact, some of my friends that have read the book say they want me now to start writing more commentaries, apart from all the defenses and all the intellectual stuff, just on political stuff, and like with Nehemiah, with David and Nathan, and I may do it, but I'm still in the early stages of recovering from having written this book and doing podcasts and webinars and things like that. So
Yeah, yeah, start on the next project right away.
right away, sure. I got nothing else on my plate.
But that is fair. I mean, not even just like other political powers within the Bible, but like how does Daniel show up throughout the Bible? We could stretch you a little bit further, Dr. Clark.
Well,
Get
you
some more
can. I
recent
mean,
audio.
well, the great thing, if you think of it, Joseph, who was taken to Egypt, evinces a very similar pattern of behavior.
Oh,
Big difference was that Joseph was sort of a smart aleck as a youth, and his brothers sent him off. But Daniel never evinced that kind of smart alecky behavior. So, but similarly, he gets put in, then he gets unjustly accused, and then he's put in a prison, and he gets vindicated at the end. There's a very similar pattern that happened with
yeah.
Joseph. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Okay, well, I mean, you already spoke about it, so thank you for that segue. But talking about his ability to resist without rebelling, I mean, on
Mhm.
page 68, I'll just read it right off here. It
Sure.
says, he needs no boasting or credit taking because the solution to the king's nightmares is God's doing, not his. And like, don't you think that's just such a clear distinction between a man who chooses to honor God and a man not dissuaded by the enemy? Because personally, like, I was on the phone with my sister once, and she's like, I did such a good job with so and so. I just felt like the Lord was leading me. Like, I had this moment of God, and I was like, be careful. Like, don't start boasting. The enemy's going to use this beautiful moment with the Lord to make you bigger and not the Lord. And it was this, like, almost like a wink of,
Mm.
like, you had a choice to either honor God or yourself. And when we get so pumped up about a success with the Lord, it quickly becomes about us. And Daniel so clearly makes it about God. He did like the impossible. Like he came to the king and it's like, I'm gonna tell you the dream and I'm gonna tell you what it means. And the king's like, yeah, bingo, that was correct. And he's like, yeah, yeah, that was God, not me. And
Yeah.
you see these like Olympians that are like they just won the race and they're like it's all God. And like I don't know, for some reason with a king who's ready to kill everybody because they can't figure it out, you would think he would like take some sort of like, yep, yep, please spare me. That was all me. Like I am of value to you. Like you're not even trying to dishonor God, but like he does it so well by just like immediately deferring to like, yeah, all of this is gonna happen because of God. The only like solution you get is because of God and what he told me, not because of me.
I think, and I love how you depicted that because I think it's not explicit in the text of Daniel, but I think it's implicit in the way he lived. I think he looked at that passage in Isaiah 49:6, and I cite several times in the book. In fact, that's my thesis. It is too small a thing for you to be my servant to restore the tribe of Jacob and bring back my people I have kept. And I will make you a light for the Gentiles so that my salvation shall be throughout the earth. Now, that was a kind of the Great Commission for Israel, or for Judah at the time. But Daniel seemed to take it personally. So he focused strictly on God because he could do nothing on his own in captivity, just as we know, but forget that we can't do anything powerful on our own in our world. And that's always the problem, right? That's the big challenge. When we understand the gospel well enough, we know that it's not up to us. It's up to God in every sense of the word. And if it weren't for God doing what he did, we could have nothing. So
But
he honored it. Yeah, anyway.
yeah, but Dr. Clark, didn't I work really hard for this? Isn't this all my doing? Wouldn't this have been possible because I worked, like that that's the immediate response. Like
Hmm.
I got this successful podcast because I worked hard and I showed up every day. And it's like, no, no. Like,
Well, there is two parts of that, right? You do work hard, and I know you do. I've since you really early on in your career of podcasting, it's like there's a clear difference to me how the quality of what you put into it. It's
thank
amazing.
you. All
And,
God, all God.
yeah, well, it's both and. God directs us. Or we have an idea what we want to do, but God directs our steps. If it weren't for the power of God, we could not do the things that we want to do. And so I think of it this way. And I think there's always that tension. We have to remind ourselves all the time. It's not me, but it is providence. It is providential in that God works through history, through human beings, through things that's natural, but he works about. I just got an invitation to do a speaking engagement with an apologetics community in North Carolina on this topic. That was providence. I didn't seek for it. I didn't find it. When I was a professor, I didn't look for grants, but I got $6 million worth of grants. I can say it's me. I had to work hard to implement it, but I always say it was up to God, right?
Well, first off, congratulations. Oh my gosh.
Well, that's probably why I was put in the Hall of Fame. Nothing the university loves more than a lot of money coming in, filling their coffers, right? No, seriously, I want to, as a personal anecdote, I want to say it was really interesting. I went to a men's retreat about the time I got asked, would you write this grant? I really didn't want to do it. I asked the guys, at this meeting, please, pray for me on this. And within seconds, this person lifts his head up, looks at me, goes, of course it should be a Christian that does it. And I thought, okay, Lord, I will do this, but I don't want to, but I'll do it. So it was an act of obedience, thinking it wouldn't work, and I would honor those who requested me, my political administrators, but God honored it. And then I had to work really hard. And boy, I tell you, from that day on, I learned to pray more fervently than I've ever prayed in the rest of my life.
Absolutely. And I don't even think that it was, and I think you mentioned this, like the manipulation of the Lord of like, well, I'm going to pray so he knows that I'm a man of God and I'm going to finesse this in my way. Like, I think you say this very on in the beginning of the book of like, it's so unchristianly, I think I have it right here, of like, it's not our job to essentially let other people know they're doing it wrong. Oh, yeah, it's on page 36, it was right at the beginning. Let's say believers, on the other hand, face a different problem. Paul shows this in Romans 2, verse 1 through 16, that attempting to follow the call of righteousness, believers will frequently fail to remain humble about their ability and about their desire to obey God. This really is basically a walk of humility when it comes to like all of the things of the Lord are given to us by grace. And I think there was a different podcaster that was saying like, that it's covered in grace because it's easy. And how easy was your career despite the hard work, of course, but like it fell into your lap because God wanted you to. Like somebody was asking me today, like, how did you get into podcasting? I'm like, well, I fought it. First of all, I didn't want to. And second of all, I had no business booking the guests that I did. Like, it's been so successful because it's been easy because of God. Mm-hmm. And I think we see that, like, I just finished Joshua, and he literally says, like, I'm going to deliver these towns, these cities, these, villages in your hand, not by your sword and bow, but because I preordained it, because I did it. None of this is by you guys. And then it's very clear when God's like, my hand's no longer helping you guys out. Now they all start getting defeated. So it really is. But I feel like even Daniel doesn't do that. Like Daniel isn't out here like honoring God to have things fall into his lap. He's like, God is covering him, but Daniel's like, regardless of if God is covering me, I'm going to serve him. I want to take a moment to highlight the platform that's revolutionizing the way that people learn about the Word of God: school. When I first started this podcast, my goal was very simple. I wanted to equip people with clear, accessible, biblical understanding through scholars. But I quickly realized that podcasting alone wasn't enough. I wanted to create a space where people could actually connect and learn and dive deeper beyond just listening. That's when I found School. School is the most user-friendly platform I've ever come across. It's built by Sam Ovens with insights from business minds like Alex Hermosi. School combines the best of online education, coaching, and community in one place. It's intuitive, powerful, and it connects you to a global network of learners and teachers. That's why I launched Biblically Heard, a place where you can chat with scholars, take courses from beginner to expert level, and even connect with me directly. So if you're looking to build a coaching business or launch an online course or create an engaged community, School beats out every other tool. It combines the best of Patreon-style tiered services and Telegram-style community feeds. It's a seamless scheduling tool with integrations with Zapier, Zoom, and even Google Calendar. If this sounds like the right platform for you, please use my affiliate link in the show notes below to get started. It won't cost you anything extra, and it keeps this channel going. Now, back to the show.
So there's a great, I don't, someone told me about this and I haven't seen it, but I would like to find it. Someone said, there's a title of a book called, If You Want to Know God's Will, Do Something. and I love that because it's, when I was doing grants and doing all that and developing, scholarships for people and things, it's like I would try 20 things and maybe one would pop, but I would just try and I would work hard at it and I would work hard at what I was doing. It was God's providence all throughout, and he had to direct and he had to help me out. I couldn't do it on my own, and I knew I couldn't even do, like, the first day. I had 25 things to do, and how do you do 25 different things in one day? Every day I had the same thing. Now, as I've grown older, it's a little bit less stressful because I am retired, but I have body health issues. It's still the same, and I have to get on my knees every day and start that way, read Psalms, read this, work on my arguments or discussion or research. We and I'll leave it, this is a surprise at the ending. We're going to be doing another book together for Reasons to Believe, and I've got a lot of work to do on it, but it's coming up. I don't know when it's going to be published, but our chapters are due in the fall, so it's one that we've talked about.
When do you sleep?
Oh, I sleep all the time. I'm fine. I'm fine.
10 hours every night.
No, maybe 7.5. I got my Apple Watch to prove it.
That's amazing. I'm so excited for that. But I agree with you. I feel like Daniel honored God despite the horrible things happening to him. I mean, you would think you'd be freaking out, but even after taken captive, which, like, not in the lion's den yet, like, bad things haven't happened yet. He's just been simply taken captive, stripped of his family, stripped of his culture, of his home, stripped physically, and you allege that he's been emasculated and castrated. I mean, on page 42, the story unfolds dramatically as Daniel makes his first appeal after suffering, stripped of his ethnic identity and likely emasculated. So how from that place you stay grounded in the Lord? You're clearly not under providence, right?
You are. You are. And so that's where, I mean, and there's a good section, as you know, we've talked about it before, on how it could have possibly happened.
Yeah.
How he could have navigated. But one of the key things is a person that deals with trauma has to somehow take agency. And I believe the agency he took was in God's kingdom, his direction through that promise in Isaiah 49:6. Because if we look at the history of Daniel, he definitely was a light. Everyone saw him as serving the Most High. There was never a question about that. And his prayer of repentance and restoration in Daniel 9 does lead King Cyrus to write the restoration letter, allow the Jews to go home. So he fulfills it to a T. But that's why I think the book of Daniel has been included in the hagiographa, or the writings, they call it, the wisdom writings. So Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Daniel, and a few others. Wisdom writings are not just manual of instruction like you get with, say, didactic passages, teaching passages. They're examples to learn from, to think about, like the Psalms and the Proverbs. Daniel's that way as well. Here we have an example of someone who lived righteously, who lived well, and what can we learn from it? And that's why it's so rich to plumb the depths of that book. And I don't think I even began to plumb the depths of it. There was a lot I didn't cover. But that book, I mean, if anyone did anything, just go read the book of Daniel, first and foremost. In fact, I recommend, if you're going to read my book, make sure you read the book of Daniel first, or you'll go back and forth between it and the book.
Oh, you can't read your book without reading the book of Daniel. It's way too confusing. But
Well,
the book of Daniel is so easy to read. Like, I read the book for the first time for our first interview, and I was like, whoa, I have been skipping over this gold. Like, truly a Semitic. It's an Odyssey.
It's amazing how rich that text is. It's amazing.
Okay, so he's staying grounded amidst starting from a place of suffering. And yes, you do go into EMDR therapy. My sister's an EMDR certified therapist. Like, I'm a product of EMDR. Like, it has transformed my life. So talking about that, I mean, even just like the therapy and how he likely walked 900 miles with his friends, talking, that bilateral stimulation through EMDR, processing that trauma. But I think that it's very clear that once you make that decision to take agency over your trauma and move forward, what was Daniel, what was he caring about, and what was he leaving in God's hands? Because, I mean, it seems like he was able to let go a lot. Like, he was able to leave a lot, like he had a job to do. He had to make friends. Like, I think that me personally, every time I've moved to different countries or a different state, I've been very worried about my well-being, my circle, my routine. Daniel didn't really seem worried about that.
That the text doesn't say. He did have his coterie of three friends, Abshak, Meshach, and Abednego, right? That's their Hananiah, Azariah, and I forget the third name.
Yeah,
anyway,
those are their pagan names. I didn't realize.
No, well, yeah, and there's Jewish names attached to it. But yeah, so he has a coterie of good friends, and they were likely the only Jews, and they would have likely been the royal descendants of Hezekiah. We see that also. And so they likely would have known each other before the captivity, and they were taken because they were part of that royalty. And it fulfilled the prophecy in Isaiah 39 because of what Hezekiah 100 years did before. So it's likely they already knew each other and stuff, but that they had to keep that bond up. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, I do too. I mean, one of the things my wife and I are considering, do we, if she hasn't retired yet, she's still an EMD therapist and does brain
Oh,
spotting. Yeah, that's where I got a lot of the research material from, because she
got
listens
it.
and researches a lot. Um, so where do we move? And we don't have friends in some places. We go to Colorado and we have some friends there, but we don't have a close knit community of fellow believers. I think we really
Mm,
want to find a place, if we retire and move out of California, to a place where we'd have a close knit group of friends. And we just don't know the answer to that. And you're right. I mean, it's something that we naturally do. But he took that with him. So I think probably the benefit is it also illustrates why we can't do this life alone. We need not only God, but we need fellow believers to help each
mm,
other. And for those believers who say, well, I don't really need church, or I can watch it online, I hope this prompts them to rethink that, because it, while it's good that you get information, what's really good is to process it with other believers, to share your pain, your sorrows, your joys. Instead of your boasting, your joys. Lord, thank you so much for this, but boy, I told my wife about the grants, or told our friends, or it's been a blessing to be able to do that. And you also, it helps because we're to help one another think about things biblically, to think and correct some mistaken beliefs. Allow us to cry, allow us to lament, but also then maybe to correct us. Look at the friends of Job, and they kind of messed up on that part. They started out with really good intention, but they began dictating to him what he was doing wrong without
mm.
knowing what God wanted. But it's really good to have a community of fellow believers. And so I highly encourage people to think of it that way. That's what he had, a coterie of really close knit friends he relied on absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that he just simplified it. I think I do personally, such a good job of overthinking. And you say on 38, page 38, Daniel worried little about the political direction of his country. How relevant is that today? He concerned himself with how he and others responded to God.
I
Amidst the
love
massive trauma, that's what he was worried about.
Yeah. And I think there's a comparable way to think about it today, and in any time politically. I have a whole chapter, as you know, on how sovereignty of God might work through levels, various levels, from cosmic, to creation, to international politics, to our lives. Um, but yeah, once you understand how God sovereignly works and then how he integrates providence, Daniel seemed to understand that, and his knowledge of that process grew through time. And he was, I think, able to integrate that. I know for a lot of people who have read the book, have commented on it, they really like chapters 3 through 8. That's the stories. It's like a mystery. What's going on happen next? But all those are important. The elements of how Daniel might have understood sovereignty, how he was then wise to see God sovereignly controlled history, and therefore he didn't have to worry. It was up to God to see the end of it. He judges nations, he judges rulers, he judges individuals, both in time and he will in eternity. So we don't have to worry about the outcome of politics. But what we have to do is stay ready, like Daniel was. Well, how do we respond to this? And let me just give an anecdote. One of the ways in which I do that is I take from our Great Commission, Matthew 28:19, go out and make disciples throughout the whole world, and following 1 Peter 3:15, do it with gentleness, respect, and a clear conscience. Is I look for opportunities worldwide when there's wars in Syria, wars in Ukraine, Yemen, Northern Africa, Sudan, Congo, border crossings, you name it. Any of the problems that go on, or politically, internally, or internationally, how can I support ministries that are going to take the gospel, take food, take help to those in need? How can I support them financially? How can I support them with resources? What can I do? What can I be participating in? And I think that changes how I looked at conflict. Instead of trying to understand what's the outcome going to be, take is this God's way of breaking up people? For example, and this is a hard example, but in Iran, there's not a lot of penetration of the gospel in there, but there are amazing amount of spiritual revival going on in Iran because the regime is so oppressive. And so how can we support indigenous missions in Iran that are probably Armenian that have a voice? And there's a lot of people coming to the gospel through that. So the same thing with Syrian refugees, with Ukrainian refugees, you name it, worldwide. There's opportunities for us to go in and help financially, with equipment, with support, help people, and see if that's part of the process God wants to take charge of, to bring about the end of time, to make sure everyone, every nation, tribe, and tongue has been reached by the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. I mean, Daniel is just, it seems impossible. The trauma that he goes through, he refocuses on the Lord. And then when he does end up interacting with society and, making that first appeal for his diet, he does so with respect. You don't see any contempt. You don't see any
Yes.
frustration. And it says on page 54, 55, he does not say the Babylonians will defile him. He says that he does not want to defile himself. So again, like, he frames even his appeals of, well, I don't want to be disgusted by you guys because you are detestable, and therefore I don't want to get that on me. He says, listen, I've got something that I'm handling within myself. Please let me, and I don't want it. And he just really owns it. He owns his goals, and he does so in a way that still honors other people. I mean, that's something I'm working on. I'm so bad at giving feedback because I'm so me centric. And so sometimes when I communicate my needs, I, without intention, show someone else that they're the problem for me by saying, like, hey, what you're doing is a problem because it doesn't work for me. And now that person's like, well, I'm the problem. It's really is. He does everything with such, like, love and grace of, like, I'm doing what's best for me. Please let me. This has nothing to do with you, you know?
Yeah, I think and I'll speak to it from the Bible, from the book of Daniel, but also on a personal note, because I think you're absolutely right. I do the same thing, so you're in good company. Um, what I think Daniel does better than anyone else, and this is where his skill, his wisdom is that he looks at the intention of the political leadership. He looks, what do they intend? What do they want when they give this order? You know, um, so why do you think the king would want all this food and wine and everything else for his people in this study group, his 3-year Babylonian administration school, let's say? Well, it's not to make them pagan. It's not to hurt them. It's actually to give them status, to give them prestige, to elicit their loyalty. And that's why Daniel's appeal is so wise. And he's not saying, you're going to defile me. He says, I can't defile myself. Now, there's some debate what all that means, but read the book and you'll see what I come to. I basically think Daniel took the intent of the political leadership and used that as the basis for how he was going to obey. And this is the way he was going to obey, if that's okay with you. But he did it in a way that was pretty firm, because if he didn't get it accepted, he could have been killed. He knew
Yeah.
that going in.
Yeah.
So on a personal note, you said that last night I told my wife, why did you turn on, open the doors? I have the air purifiers on. I have this bad asthma. And she got upset with me and went for a walk, came back, and she has the best way of handling things. She came back, sat down, and said, look at me. We're a team. I don't intend to hurt you. Why did you do that? You make me feel beat up. She gave me an imagery that I had to take to heart. She's really good at stuff like that. So you're in good company. Don't worry about it. We all have to work on it.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm the worst of the worst. Yeah, I know. I know my downfalls, and that does everyone a favor because now I can work on them. It really just humility is just like the key to move forward. But okay, there's a couple of things in Daniel that I feel like, again, like I said, it's like an odyssey. There's so many things that happen, and just kind of jumping in, like, if this is kind of rapid fire, there's like four main things. I just want to say, like, what does the average reader miss? Because there's the diet. There's the strategic appeals of authority that we kind of touched on. There's cosmic warfare, which you and me talking about aliens, it was very, since we've spoken about aliens, I've had a lot of conversations about angels, the unseen realm, demons.
Okay.
And you mentioned, like, everything. Like, I was reading and I was like, I know what he's saying. Like, I can reference it. And then the rejection of political rewards. Let's kind of go into each one of them real quick. I don't want to spend too much time on them, but with the superfoods in the diet, you make a point in the book to talk about that he's not just, like, omitting wine, he's omitting meat, he's eating superfoods. He's actually taking a diet that was notably healthy for him because it wasn't, I mean, it was unprocessed, but I don't think they had many processed food, but like alcohol or a lot of sugar or a lot of carbs or whatever it might be. I mean, anything back then was probably better for you than anything we've got on the shelves
Probably.
here. But yet still, he it wasn't just him saying no and omitting, like, I don't want to be a part of this court. It was him making a choice that was ultimately way healthier for him.
I don't know that, and that's a good point. I'm not sure that was his intention as much as to find a way to be set apart from everyone else, but to do it in a way that honored the intentions. And because he said, test me 10 days in this and see what you decide. He gives them the right to make the judgment call on this. But I think the unintended consequence was that he had a much healthier diet, and at an age, and I talk about this from neuroscience, that's an age when we're sloughing off neurons like and shedding neurons left and right and redeveloping new ones that's going to affect us for a long time. Those superfoods, those unprocessed foods, and barley is slightly processed. You field it, you make bread out of it, but it's not processed the way in which we are. It's hyper processed foods. It's all very natural, very healthy, and it would have been very conducive to both long life, cardiovascular health, cognitive health, and longevity in his life. Less radioactive substances, no meats. Because we see later in Daniel, when he goes on a 3-week prayer and fast, he explicitly says he ate no meat and wine. That wasn't forbidden in Levitical law. So the unintended thing is that it probably helped him live longer and be smarter and be more healthy throughout his life.
Yeah, that's a solid point. He was just like right on the mark over and over again. Okay, secondly, the strategic appeals that he used to
Mhm.
authority. What was noticeably different about what he did versus what we typically see?
Yeah, again, I think the key thing is that Daniel always looks to the kingdom of God first. What's God's intent? And he knew he was there for a reason. So he was to bring about the return of the tribe of Jacob, right? He knew there was some purpose for him. He didn't know what it was at the time until later, because he then later reads Jeremiah, the prophecies of Jeremiah. So he had to be obedient. So he looks to the intent of God, and then he looks to the intent of the political leadership. And the reason why this becomes so important is that, a lot of us don't like authority, right? I mean, who wants to obey always traffic signs? Now we know that there's good from it. Um, but scriptures are very clear. Since the fall, political authorities are set up to protect us, to help us. And probably it's the result of sin, right? The whole idea of having government constraints on us is to protect us, protect society from internal evil and external evil. So political authority is really important, even if it's done unjustly. It's somewhat better than sometimes anarchy. Anarchy, the absence of authority, if you look worldwide and look at states that have failed, they're horrible messes, and criminal warlords and gangs and terrorists take over, and they always do things at the expense of the most vulnerable, women and children. And young boys get caught up in gang warfare, and it's horrible for everyone. So while political authority is sometimes hard, the alternative is much worse. And so I think he has a heart to know what God's kingdom is first, and then the intent of the king or the intent of the political authority over him. And that's something that I think we need to pay attention to, and thinking about our own lives. How do we look? There's all kinds of arguments. I don't want to get in a COVID discussion, but were they intending just to put the screws to us and all that? And there's all that stuff. I think the intent was to help prevent a catastrophe. Did they overdo it? Obviously, yes. And there was some responses that people had that were really good. But we have to look to the political intent first on
What are
any
some,
situation. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, some like practical applications here? What are some ways that, like modern ways
hmm
that you are already looking at what Daniel does and you're applying them today strategically towards authority?
Well, I think I learned during my career as a professor that, in particular, I had to do appeals with that kind of wisdom, with that kind of grace, with that kind of tact, honoring the deans, the associate provosts, the presidents, the chancellor's office, even though I had my disagreements about how they ran administration, about the direction, the political direction. It didn't matter. God put me there, and I had to honor what God wanted me to do, because he had purposes for me to honor him in that process, and which meant I had to also honor those political leadership. Now, what that meant was, like Daniel, though, I didn't want to be absorbed, or what the deans wanted me to do is become mainstream. They wanted me to culturally become acculturated to the way they did things, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't dishonor God that way. I had
Were
to
you
remain
so
a
afraid of
Christian.
getting fired?
Yeah, but I mean, you know, honestly, I actually developed some trauma on that. I had did some EMDR on that because of that. I didn't know it at the time. It was years later that came out in weird ways. We could talk about that offline, but it was quite real. Yeah.
My sister says everybody has trauma. It has an impact on you. That is trauma. It doesn't have to be a horrible, horrible accident, but was it traumatic because you had to put your foot down in a place that you felt previously safe?
Yeah, I didn't even think about it until I was harassed by these deans, and
Oh,
then it was, oh my goodness, I am very vulnerable here. I mean, and
oh,
Hugh and Kathy Ross, they talked about it later. They said you stood up in a way that was great because your job was at risk, and I didn't even think of it that way. All I knew is that I had to find a way to manage this approach, and Daniel was the way in which I learned to manage it. If that makes sense, isn't it?
it does, it does. So just like if somebody's listening, they're like, so what did you do? How did you embody Daniel?
Well, so I stayed faithful. I still was on TBN. I still co-hosted. I actually wrote a chapter in a book called Professors of Belief, put it on my bookshelf in my office. I put one in the library. I'm not going to back away from this. Um, it's just, you have to honor God, right? And if people ask me about it, I will tell them about it. I am a Christian. Yes, every time.
And okay,
But still do my job in such a way that they couldn't attack me for poor workmanship, right? I still
right.
had to teach really well, make sure I mentor students really well, make sure I publish really well, make sure I, fulfilled my service obligations. And then when I got grants, they certainly honored the university in a way that I could not have anticipated. So, yeah.
I think you spell it out really well on page 67. You say, demanding, protesting, or throwing fits seem less likely to elicit cooperation in the matter. A righteous appeal done righteously with humility threatens no one and demonstrates God's kingdom power, a power based on our weakness and his greatness.
Hmm. I don't know how to add it to anything to that. That's Daniel evinces that throughout. He righteous appeal done righteously, and it becomes very appealing even to those who may not care for your faith, for your faith walk. I have people I talk to who are non-Christians who don't like, or who hated the previous president and who hate this president. They're either side, right? And they'll often come to me, help me understand this, help me navigate this. And I say, well, look, I'm neither a Biden whisperer nor a Trump whisperer, but let's talk about what we see, and let's
Mm.
think about it. And they're not Christian, and I'll share my faith and why I'm not so worried as they are. And I try to get to a point. I try to have good conversations with them, respectful ones, listen to them, because I'm hoping for a God conversation and then a gospel conversation at some point in the future.
Oh, that is a great target to keep your eyes on in any of
Yes.
these conversations, just to have a God and a gospel conversation. You want to talk about the president? Well, we're going to talk about God and gospel, but sure, yeah, we'll talk about the president.
Yeah. Well, and you got to establish that trust in that relationship, right? Let them
Yeah,
trust you first, just like I think Daniel got trusted in what he did because he worked well.
yeah,
And then people were willing to listen to him, and then he could make his appeals. So,
yeah. Okay, moving on. You talk about angels, angelic hierarchy, the warfare there. You mention a lot of things. You talk about the angels in the Old Testament were probably messengers, which I've discussed. Angels just simply a term for a messenger, whether
mhm.
spiritual or human. But there's celestial beings that rule over the nations. That's mentioned in Deuteronomy. We've got beings that are called princes in Daniel 10. Michael is labeled as a chief prince in the Greek version. There's also the Watchers that we might see in Daniel. There's also the sons of God that we see in Job. There's the divine council. There's all of these beings. What are your takes on angels kind of coming out of like, oh, I thought there was just like guardian angel, Michael, and like, Gabriel and the seraphim. Like, what are your takes on this?
Yeah. So yeah, and then the simplified version, the kids version, is devil on my shoulder and the angel on my other, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
or my guardian angel is, the only things angels do is protect me from an accident or something.
Mm-hmm.
This
Mm-hmm.
is richer, you have to read the book. You have to read Daniel, and you have to read the book to explore it, because there's angelic beings, and we call them that. That's the New Testament term, but Paul acknowledges all throughout. You look in Ephesians, there's powers, there's hierarchies, there's lords, kurios, there's others. So he recognizes there's this spiritual geographic domain terms that the scriptures use in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. And it's clear that there's a lot more going on to international conflict and I think civil wars than simply humans acting out against one another. That there's angelic beings who control territory, who want power, who fighting one another. And what I mean by that is cosmic spiritual beings. At the end, and we look at Psalm 82, they will be judged. They will be treated like humans and judged just like any human for having corrupted themselves. But there's a lot more going on in international politics, and it really is above our pay grade. Daniel never prays to them, never does anything with them. They are the only ones that initiate the contact with him.
Whoa.
And I would encourage people not to think that they can go out and engage animals. We see warnings on that in Jude and 2 Peter. This is not for us to look into. If anything, you can
to engage with angels,
to call on them, to try to rebuke them or whatever. It's the Lord rebuke you at most. That's the most we can do. So the Prince of Russia, the Tsar of Russia, yeah, Lord, rebuke him. I don't want him to keep on brutalizing the Ukrainian people. Lord, or whatever, that's up to God. That's up to the angelic realm. That's a cosmic battle that's going on. But Daniel and his friends are sometimes confronted with him. But be careful. There was a show on years ago called, what was it called? Something with angels. I forget that. It was, Touched by an Angel. That's what it was. Apologize for taking so long. Touched by an Angel. I used to joke it should have been called Torched by an Angel, because when angels came and visited people, they faded or ran away afraid. It's scary to meet a divine being, a celestial being. So we have no business interacting with them. God will ascend us above them in eternity. But for now, they're over us, and they're actually working on both sides, for and against us. So yeah, there is Satan, there's the world, the flesh, and the devil. And it's internal, external, and spiritual enemies that work against us.
I really like the term that you're using, above our pay grade, because I feel like I'm getting humbled right now, because I'm like, what's up? What do they do? What do they look like? What are the different jobs? It's like, Cass, doesn't matter. They don't work for you. Shut up.
Well, I think I've had to reconcile myself to that too. Yeah, because I looked at the New Testament, and there was a period of time between probably fourth through the second century, maybe even all the way up to the New Testament times, the intertestamental period. There are people really trying to get a handle on this, and they went out of control. And Jude and Peter rebuke people that are engaged in this process, because it is above our pay grade. So, yeah.
Last thing that I think really stood out, something that totally went over my head, was how Daniel wouldn't receive gifts. He's high ranking, he's serving the king. Of course, they're going to be like, hey, you want a new boat? Hey, you want some more land? You want a new wife? And he's like, no. And because of that, they couldn't leverage this greed to get what he wanted. Like, they're going to take away the things that they gave him in order to get Daniel to do what he wants. Like, because he opted out of, any fortune or rewards, he was actually freer.
I love the integrity of Daniel is the other part that's really, to me, outstanding, right? He was probably so incorruptible that's what made the court officials under King Darius, jealous of him, not because he was Jewish or because he was an outsider, but because he would probably wipe out and we see it to this day. They make so much money off of being a bureaucrat, being a politician, working in bureaucracies. It's well known through the ancient world it's happened. We see it worldwide. It's not new. It's not, people do this. How does a person go into the Congress with $1 million and come out with 20 million, right? This kind of stuff goes on all the time. How do you go from working for the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and then becoming a head of aerospace, right? I mean, this happens all the time. So part of it's influence peddling, part of it's influence buying. The only way to live an incorruptible life is to be open, to be transparent, to have integrity. And that's really cool. I mean, one of the things I was really proud of, and God helped me, in the grants, we were the first one to actually have an audit that actually cleared with zero defect of all of our grant management. First one. Yeah. and that is a testimony to what I think God wanted me to do, is be faithful and just, not to reap rewards, but to administer this justly. So that's another thing, another way I took things away from Daniel. Daniel really helped me in tons of ways.
Yeah, it's really helping me as well. I mean, just kind of closing up, like, what would you say is the difference between resistance and resentment?
That's good. Resistance is, can I reframe it? And here's how I'm going to reframe it. There are laws that allow us to do things that are unethical, unjust. We don't have to obey those. It's when laws compel us to do something that's unjust is when we have to really consider disobeying. So,
Unjust as in like unbiblical?
well, yeah, I mean, so for a long time in China, there was this policy that you had to have one child, and you had to have abortions after that, and you couldn't refuse that, otherwise you might get in trouble. That was a law of compellence. Abortion in America is different. It's allowed, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to obey. That's not a law that's compelling you to do something. I mean, that's an extreme example. But it's the same thing like at university. There was no law that compelled me to disavow my Christian faith. Had one come up, I would have had to have refused that law at some cost to me, and that would have been fine. Does
So
that
you're
make
saying
sense?
like, yeah, I'm just trying to make it relatable to me.
Okay. Well, so again, if you understand God's, I mean, and it's something we all wrestle with, so it's not just you, it's all of us. If you really fully understand God's sovereign control over history, his kingdom politics, right? What he wants. What does he want from you in this podcast? What is it, helping people? Is it doing things? How do I align my beliefs, my faith, my actions with that vision that God has for this process, this project that you've been doing? Um, if someone doesn't come on, do you resent them? Well, it could be divine providence that they didn't come on. They might not have been a good testimony for a lot of reasons. Do you resent people that critique? I mean, I know we've talked about it. There's a lot of negative commentary on your social media, I'm sure, about different things, right? Um, we have to allow people to handle things. I don't know. That's just mine. You're resisting unjust laws, unjust compellence, but I can't think of a way. It's really starkly clear, and think about with Daniel. He was likely emasculated, castrated, but we see no evidence that he resented anyone. He still respects them,
Mm.
but he still chooses or requests a wise way to get being set apart with the diet. Um, we see the same thing when the Arioch, the commander, comes through and says, "We got to," in Daniel chapter 2, "we got to kill off all you wise men." That's Nebuchadnezzar's mad. We don't see Daniel go, "Stop that! That's unjust." He says, "What's the urgency of the matter? How can I help you?" He's looking for ways to. So I think it's I don't know. You might want to talk to your sister more about that because resentment is. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help us inside, right? It does no good. Being angry, you have to get rid of sin, right? Once you acknowledge, it's okay to be angry. Angry motivates us to do. Anger can motivate us to do something about it. Emotion puts us in motion, so that's all good. But then to resent the outcome, to resent that's in God's hands.
Mm.
How can you resent it? I mean,
Yeah,
at the end of the day, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. It really is. I think like one of the key things is like, what are we told what to do and what do we have the option to opt in and out of? And I think that's a really great, like, okay, where does faith come in? Like, is this even a problem with my faith if no one's forcing me to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Or can I just simply like not participate or just like take this moment to talk about my faith? Because I'm not actually breaking any laws like with you and your job. So that's a really good perspective to put on it. One of the things that have like stopped me in my tracks with this and like, oh my gosh, it was like the mic drop moment because I think I've gone through like a pretty rough 6 months. It was really rough losing my job because I have such a tie to my self-worth and like not making money. Am I so grateful that this happened? Yes. Like the rewards of like being able to full-time podcast in 6 months is like immeasurable, especially like the long-term impact that I know God will deliver on. So despite all that, you have these moments of like, why? Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
so mad. Like, I've had these moments where I'm just like, like crying out and like on my
Mm-hmm.
knees. And in those moments, you're just like, I'm supposed to thank God right now. I don't have an ounce of gratitude because I am so scared. I am
Mm-hmm.
so afraid. I am so angry. And right now, I'm supposed to thank God, and you want to because that's what you're supposed to, but you're like, God, I'm being honest with you, like,
Hmm.
where? How is that possible? Like, make it make sense. How I'm supposed to like find the little route that like leads me to gratitude because all I know is fear. And on 86, this is he's just found out that he's going to Lion's Den.
Hmm.
He know like they made that law and he's like, oh, I'm still gonna go home and worship God, and they're like, see, he got caught, and he's like, yeah, I know what you guys are doing, and of course the king was upset, and he goes home and he thanks God. I'm gonna read it. You wrote it so well.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Oh my gosh, what is it? 86. Okay, look at all the highlighting on this. Okay, so when he learns of the decree, he goes directly home to his upstairs room to the window that faces Jerusalem and he prays, giving thanks to God. I was reading this at night and I'm like, what? That like I like jerked awake. Something he's been doing for a very long time. But did he know the conspirators would be watching him? The text does not say. But because of the warning about the conspiracy, he may have already been praying to God about the threat of entrapment. And this is it. His giving thanks to God was another opportunity for God to demonstrate his sovereign control over events. And I think that just like hit me because I was like, oh, thank you, God, for this horrible thing that's happening because now you get to show up and like you get to show up big because
Hmm.
it's so bad. And I think some people would be like, those Christians will find a silver lining in everything. Like, oh, thank God. Like that masochistic part of our Christianity where we like love the pain. But it really is like evil will happen. Bad things will happen. God at no point guarantees it'll be easy. But even when it's bad, it's like, but this is still good because God is going to show up because
Hmm.
it's God. And it's going to be big and unfathomable and holy and glorious. And thank God I get to experience that. Like, that to me has flipped my world. Like, it's one of those feelings of like, oh, I'm good and I'm going to be good forever because even when I'm bad, I'm good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. In the meantime, go to Psalm 56, read that. That's a prayer of lament, and it's a great way to think about it. You turn to God, you take your problem honestly to God, and then settle on eventually what his direction will be. Doesn't mean it happens in an instant. I've been lamenting lately because of my health issues. Like I told you, I have to have reverse shoulder replacement surgery, and it's
Oof.
coming. It's supposed to be the summer, but I've got trips to Montana, to Canada, and to Washington D.C. planned, and I can't have it. So I've been lamenting. That's okay. It's what we got to do. Got to lament and then seek God's help, God's wisdom on this.
And he's gonna
So
show up. Oh my gosh. Oh, I loved that part because you would think like he's going to the lion's den. Like that's not gonna be an easy death. That's not even like
no,
okay, head's coming off. Shot to the heart. Like death by lions.
yeah,
And
yeah,
like
exactly.
I
Hmm.
just it just amazes me like his patience and his faithfulness. Like it's insane. I
Hmm.
uh I really enjoyed this read. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for sending it to me and allowing me to now share it with my network. Tell me more. How can people get their hands on this book?
So you can get it on Amazon.com, but I think the paperback version is $26. If you go to Whip and Stock, and I think you're going to include a link.
All the links will be here.
Okay, if you go to the publisher Whip and Stock, there's a coupon code you can put in CONF40, and you get 40% discount.
Yes,
So
yep, I will CONF40 for 40% off.
right. So, but I strongly, as much as I want you to get the book, for obvious reasons, this is a labor of love. I've been working on it for 6.5 years working on researching and writing, but 35, 36 years passion of mine. It's a labor of love. As much as I want people to read the book, I really want you to read the book of Daniel and to really understand it. And I think it's a great book for 100 reasons more than we've talked about here today.
And you have a Substack. So if people want other takes, aliens, national security, they can subscribe to your Substack.
Yes, marktclark.substack.com. And just so you know, there's also a study guide to the book of Daniel that has a series of questions about each chapter that'll help you get more fruit out of the study if you look at the book and read the book.
Beautiful. I'll include all of those links in the show notes if you're on YouTube, if you're on Spotify, wherever you might be listening. Wow, I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for chatting.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been epic to be here with you today. Epic, as the kids
Ep-
say.
Epic.
Epic.
Let's
Epic.
find another excuse to bring you back on for these other discussions,
Well,
Dr. Clark.
I will tell you that we have that book, a new book coming out, and it's a all new version of Lights in the Sky, Little Green Men, but updated. Almost
Oh,
25 years later. Yep.
Oh, so we could talk about aliens again.
We, yeah, not my favorite subject, but this is where you, because it's dealing with dark forces, right? So you have to pray and be in the spirit. You have to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, 1,000%. I think that's all. I feel like there was one other thing that I wanted to ask you, but maybe it's just slipping my mind. Anyways, thank you so much. We'll find an excuse to bring you back on. You are always welcome back, but
thank you.
we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Cassian. I appreciate your, I really do appreciate the time here. Thank you.